bylaws. And the bylaws are the rules that we use to govern our guild. So what are you allowed to do? What aren't you allowed to do? What are our core values? And we share this between Horde and Alliance. We're about to organize BylawCon so that we can all get together and revise the bylaws. But there's an interesting study by a group of sociologists and anthropologists doing a detailed analysis of guilds. And some guilds are very relaxed, and they don't have very many rules. But they tend to be less happy than the guilds that have fairly strict bylaws and manage things in a fairly organized way. And you would think it's kind of the opposite, that the relaxed guys would stay relaxed. But it turns out that some people, that typically having some kind of guidelines and some kind of predictable leadership and rules is very important. And when you get to 400 people, right now, I'm the guild leader, and then we have administrators, and we have officers, and veterans, and members, and initiates, and cooler, which means you can't do anything. But we can talk about this guild management a little bit more. Actually, I'll talk about it now. One of the interesting things is when I set up the bylaws, I looked at a lot of open source projects. So I looked at Wikipedia. I looked at Mozilla. I looked at some of the open. I'm not an expert in open source, although I play one on TV. So I was asking a lot of people about open source and management in open source, and I think there's a lot that you can learn. It's absolutely not the same, but the fact that it's very open and that many types of people can come in, and that you're rewarding mostly by giving people credit. There definitely are roles, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from the management in World of Warcraft, and the biggest difference, I think, is that, again, the diversity of the kinds of people who participate in World of Warcraft makes it a challenge because, for instance, really basic things like you should respect each other. Some people, when they first come, they say, why should I respect each other? And then you sit down and explain why it actually is a good thing, and they like it. Or some people come in and are racist, and we've had some very racist people in our guild. But if you sit down and explain, well, would you say that if you knew that the other person was that race? And he said, no. Well, then how do you know in the game that we don't have, Chinese or midgets or whatever? And then people realize, oh, he's a priest. And what they suddenly realize is this diversity in this guild is actually a plus. They suddenly feel the euphoria of being able to talk to a group and having a reverend sit there and laugh at their jokes. And they realize that tolerance in their speech is worth the trade-off of being able to communicate with a whole diverse range of people. So embrace diversity is something a lot of kids don't know anything about, especially in America. And they come to our guild and realize that Chinese kids can be smart too. There's a 15-year-old kid who apologized for asking me whether I was Japanese. And I said, don't worry about it. He said, will you still be my friend if I ask you if you're Japanese? And so I think depending on the culture you come from, it's very different. But this is also interesting because as you codify it and you write it down, you realize things that you take for granted aren't taken for granted by everybody else. And I guess we can talk about trust later, but a lot of this is about trust. And my presentation thing stopped. Okay. I'll try to leave time for discussion. So the other interesting outcome is this convergence with machinima. And I think most people probably know what it is, but it's using game engines and game content to make video. And as you know, video is huge already, but having video cameras and taking video involves a lot of work and involves a little bit of talent. Doing game machinima also involves talent, but at least you can use the game engines to create content. And so there's a huge body of work, which is people making video content from World of Warcraft. I'm going to do an advertisement. This is our guild promo video. The voice is actually our reverend. The script was written by a girl at Google.
This land was once scorched by battle, and felt the hooves of war upon its back. Many generations have passed, and children now grow and laugh, never having known our sacrifice. We are the heroes of the past. You are the heroes of tomorrow. We know the winds are never calm for very long, and the time will soon come for heroes amongst you to rise up once again.
So the biggest problem, thank you. The biggest problem is we don't have the rights to use most of this stuff. The music is stolen, and some of the video is from other guilds. Lucky it wasn't me who made it, and I'm only showing this for educational, non-commercial purposes right now. But one of the biggest hurdles right now is the fact that it's illegal to do most of this stuff. One of the few cases that's actually pushed machinima past a certain threshold was MTV saw a video game and some music put together that they loved. So they contacted the record label and the video game company, and as you know, if MTV is excited about it, that's fine. So they broadcast it on MTV, and it's kind of established machinima as a legitimate form. And you can have kind of, somewhat serious videos like ours, but you can also get into other kinds of description. This is a video from another guild called the Pink Ponies.
Take you to a gay bar. I wanna take you to a gay bar. I wanna take you to a gay bar, gay bar, gay bar. Let's start a war. Start a nuclear war. At the gay bar, gay bar, gay bar. Wow!
I think you get the idea. But clearly this is getting to the point where I think Blizzard would want to exercise moral rights and things like that. But it's, so in that sense, Second Life is much better. Second Life allows the user to own their content. They encourage machinima. They have video capture built in. Warcraft is kind of, so Blizzard, they're friendly. But when for instance, I asked them if I could use a screenshot in a magazine to talk about how great they are, and they said, oh, okay. Talk to our legal department. And then the legal department said, what kind of magazine is it? And I said, it's owned by a company called Hitachi. And they said, is that a corporation? What do they do? And they said, you have to sign a contract to use this screenshot. And so I didn't use the screenshot. But they don't understand, I think they understand the value of fan art, but I don't think they understand this notion of sharing economy yet. So I wanted to leave time because I think it's more interesting to hear what other people say. But I think, one of the couple of basic things I'll just say about the architecture, since I know that a lot of people here play. And then this part I'll get back to comparing a little bit with Second Life. One of the biggest problems that I find with World of Warcraft is they have a sharded system. So you have hundreds of servers, and when you start the game and you don't know anybody, you start on some server. They have transfers now, but basically, just because we play, there's probably a 1% chance that we can actually meet inside the game. So even though people call it the new golf, it's not. It's kind of like, you can talk about what you do, but it's very difficult to play with your friends. And I think that's a fundamental problem in the design that's not going to get fixed by just an evolutionary step. The good thing about Second Life is that they've made it so that each part is connected. Each island, they call it a sim, is on a separate server. The problem is each sim can only support a small number of people, so if you put more people on, the sim crashes. And then when you walk between sims, you fall in the crack and things like that. But they're trying, and I think the idea of making it a single world is going to be an important part of the next game. I think that user-generated content, player-generated content, the add-on stuff is important, but if you remember all the way back to when we were playing MUDs, one of the best parts about becoming a wizard was you could create your own dungeons, you could create your own monsters, people could play in your instances. And so while Warcraft has done a very good job at creating content that is engaging, they haven't allowed players to create their own content, which I think is kind of where there could be a lot of work done, and I think that it's coming up. The guild management is also a very interesting thing. I can't speak on behalf of Warcraft, but the new expansion that they're putting out, they no longer have 40-man instances. They're now smaller. They're like the maximum is 25, and they're 5, 15, 25. And I think mainly because the large guilds that could do the 40-man were kind of exclusive, and a lot of people felt left out because they couldn't get the final gear. And a lot of the issues about guilds and what you do in guilds, it happened outside of the game and was outside of the control. But I think there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the guilds. I mean, for instance, right now, when we're about to run a raid, what I would love to be able to do is to be able to say, okay, how many of my priests are available right now? The ones that are available, send them an SMS to see if they're available in this order. And if I'm a priest and I'm sitting around doing something in my garden and I get an SMS saying, we're about to run Molten Core, we're short a priest, I'll come running. And I think that this is an important thing. And Second Life has done fairly well. They have an API and a way to interact with the web and things like that. The problem is with Warcraft, since we don't have real-time communication, it's very difficult to build applications that allow guilds to interact with things like that in the game. And I don't see them opening that up in the future. Another big issue around Warcraft is actually there are theories that and again, people probably know this, but there are gold farmers, which basically play the game professionally, and they take their items and they sell them, they get the gold, and then they sell the gold for real on the internet. The problem is World of Warcraft, since it's out of band, if you think about this, the issue of cracking down on this, they say if you are caught buying gold, well, how do you get caught buying gold? Because you can't pay in the game, right? So if you buy me dinner and I give you gold, I haven't bought gold. If I owe you $25 and I give you gold instead, is that buying gold? At what point is it constitute buying gold? If Tim has a character and I send him, if I go to a gold farmer and buy gold and have them send gold to Tim, he hasn't bought gold. There's no way, technically, for Blizzard to know if you've bought gold, really. And so it's a very difficult problem. Some Chinese game companies have actually started doing this item exchange as part of their business model. Second Life has a Linden Dollar exchange. Interestingly, I was talking to some of the Blizzard guys. A lot of the reason they don't like gold being an important part of the game is that real-life money being an ability to have influence in the game isn't egalitarian, and they want it to be fair. The irony I found was the Chinese people I talked to about MMORPGs said, well, obviously rich people should have more power in the game. And it was kind of ironic to me that the Americans were the ones that wanted an egalitarian system. But I do think that's another part that's going to change. So having said that, I don't see a Warcraft killer on the horizon. I see a lot of things that we'd like to change. But I also see that a lot of the people in Warcraft were guilds that were happening on Final Fantasy, that were happening on EverQuest, and I think it's like a nightclub, right? So I don't know, you all go to nightclubs. You go to a nightclub, everybody gets excited, a new nightclub opens, everybody moves over, and that's it. And so I think we're waiting for the next nightclub. It's hard to take the risk of starting a new nightclub when you have a big popular one going on. And so I think that, and it takes several years to make a game at this scale, so we'll see. Hopefully, some of the open source stuff like Croquet and other things may start developing to the point where there may be some kind of open source model of something that we can take from learning about World of Warcraft. Because at the end